The morning air in suburban Atlanta was crisp and tinged with the faint smell of wet grass after an early drizzle, a rare freshness that seemed to mock Emily Thompson's own sense of unease. She stood by the kitchen window, her slender fingers wrapped around a steaming mug of black coffee, eyes tracing the familiar but now unsettling neighborhood streets. Emily Thompson was a woman of quiet elegance. At 38, she carried herself with a subtle poise, her chestnut hair falling in gentle waves past her shoulders, freckles dusting the bridge of her nose, and her green eyes, usually sparkling with warmth, now narrowed in suspicion. Her petite frame belied the iron determination that had quietly built the successful CPA firm she ran from home. The soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional chirp of robins were the only sounds in the room, yet the silence felt heavier than the noise of any bustling city morning. Emily had started noticing the irregularities 2 months ago. At first, it was the small cash withdrawals, innocuous amounts, $500 here, $700 there, but always from different branches, never exceeding $1,000 at a time. She had asked David casually, "Honey, why are you taking out cash so often?" David Thompson, a sharply built man of 42, with a square jaw, dark brown eyes, and the faintest stubble tracing his chin, had smiled, a practiced warmth that masked his restlessness, and said, "Investments. You know how I love rare coins." That explanation had settled the matter, though not entirely. David's presence always exuded confidence, bordering on arrogance, a trait that had once been charming, but now felt suffocating. His tailored suits hung perfectly on his broad shoulders, and his hands, calloused from years of amateur woodworking, were always impeccably manicured, a contradiction that Emily had once laughed about. But now, every gesture seemed calculated. As she sipped her coffee, her phone pinged with an email notification from the bank. Emily felt a flutter of anxiety she couldn't shake and opened it. Her pulse quickened. There it was, an alert about another withdrawal. But this time, she noticed something different. The account balance had dropped in a pattern too methodical to be coincidence. She scrolled through past transactions, her hands trembling slightly. There were dozens of small withdrawals, perfectly spaced out over months. A cold realization began to creep in. These weren't for coin collecting. She felt a faint pressure in her chest, a mix of dread and disbelief. Her stomach churned. Emily couldn't help replaying David's excuses in her mind, each one now tainted by suspicion. She remembered the weekend he claimed he was attending a corporate networking retreat, while she stayed home with their son, Lucas. Lucas, a bright-eyed 15-year-old with sandy blonde hair and a mischievous smile that mirrored his mother's, was oblivious to the growing storm in his household. Emily's heart ached at the thought of shielding him from the truth while simultaneously unraveling it. Her maternal instincts clashed with her investigative curiosity. Late that afternoon, Emily decided to dig deeper. She opened her laptop, the familiar hum of the device now feeling like a heartbeat in a silent room. The screen glared back at her, reflecting her pale, freckled face and the worry lines forming around her eyes. She began reviewing bank statements, cross-referencing David's withdrawals, looking for patterns. Hours passed unnoticed. Emily's mind was a whirlwind of calculations and conjectures, her usually methodical approach now tinged with frantic urgency. Each anomaly added weight to a sinking feeling she tried desperately to suppress. She wondered if she was imagining things, letting paranoia creep in. But the numbers didn't lie. Emily had always trusted David implicitly. He had been her first love, the father of her child, the man who promised a life of partnership and mutual respect. That trust now felt like a fragile glass sculpture she was holding with bare hands, ready to shatter at the slightest tremor. The thought that he might be betraying her, not emotionally, but financially, cut deeper than she expected. She closed her eyes, inhaled slowly, and tried to visualize the man she had known. The one who had taken her to their first art exhibit, who had held her hand through late-night storms during Lucas's infancy. And then she remembered the pattern of withdrawals, the way the cash seemed to vanish without explanation, and a cold knot of fear settled in her stomach. The next morning, Emily's unease intensified. David was in the kitchen, flipping pancakes, his dark brown eyes focused on the sizzling batter. His hair, slightly disheveled from sleep, gave him a casual charm, yet his jaw was set, hinting at the control he exerted over every detail of their lives. Emily approached him cautiously, attempting to keep her voice neutral. "David, I need to ask you about something serious," she began. David looked up, a flash of concern crossing his face, quickly masked by a reassuring smile. "Of course, Em. What's on your mind?" His tone was smooth, practiced, a voice that could soothe or deceive. "I've been reviewing our accounts," Emily said slowly, watching his reactions. "I noticed frequent withdrawals, multiple branches, amounts under 1,000. She paused, trying to gauge his expression. He shrugged, a casual gesture, but there was a flicker of something, an almost imperceptible tightening of his lips. "Honey, it's just for my hobbies," he said again. "Coin collecting. You know I'm meticulous about it. Nothing shady, I promise." But Emily had learned to read the micro-expressions, the tiny betrayals in body language. His shoulders were too tense, his eyes too alert. Something was off. Emily excused herself under the pretense of checking emails and began searching online for ways to trace unusual financial activity. She discovered forums where people discussed signs of financial deception in marriages, learned about patterns of small withdrawals, shell accounts, and forged signatures. Every new piece of information confirmed her worst fears. She felt a peculiar detachment, as if watching her life from the outside. Her love for David, her hope for a secure future, all felt like fragile illusions. By late afternoon, the first seeds of resolve began to take root. Emily knew she needed help. She reached for her phone and dialed Karen Miller, her childhood friend and former detective. Karen answered promptly, her voice calm but firm. Karen was a striking woman in her 40s, tall and athletic, with cropped black hair and piercing blue eyes that missed nothing. Her presence always inspired confidence. Emily explained the situation briefly, trying to maintain composure. Karen's response was immediate and professional. "I'll help you, Em. This isn't just suspicion anymore. We need to uncover everything before it's too late." Emily felt a flicker of relief. She wasn't alone in this. That evening, Emily sat in the living room, the soft glow of the lamp highlighting the worried furrows in her forehead. Lucas was playing video games, unaware of the storm brewing around him. Emily's mind raced with scenarios, some terrifying, some almost cinematic in their potential for retribution. She realized that trust, once broken, was not something easily repaired. She felt the first sting of a realization that had been forming over weeks. Her life, the comfortable structure she had built, was fragile. Every routine, every smiling dinner, every casual hug from David was now under scrutiny. Emily Thompson, once content and trusting, was now alert, analytical, and quietly furious. She had glimpsed the cracks in her perfect life and knew that confronting them would be painful, but unavoidable. The night stretched on, shadows from the lamp casting long patterns on the wall, mirroring the dark uncertainty now infiltrating her mind. For the first time in years, she felt the uncomfortable thrill of a detective within, compelled to seek the truth at any cost, for herself And for Lucas, she understood one thing clearly. Nothing could return to normal until the deception was fully exposed. The early afternoon sky over Atlanta was a pale gray, the clouds hanging low like a prelude to rain, reflecting the heaviness that weighed on Emily Thompson's chest. She sat at her dining table, the polished oak surface gleaming under the muted light, a folder of bank statements and notes spread before her. Her green eyes, normally calm and observant, were sharp, scanning the documents with a relentless intensity. Emily's fingers, slender and precise, drummed nervously against the mug of untouched chamomile tea beside her. She felt the familiar tension in her shoulders, a coiled spring of anxiety and determination. It was one thing to suspect David of financial deception. It was another to discover the possibility of an entirely hidden life. Karen Miller, Emily's childhood friend and former detective, sat across from her. Karen was tall and athletic, her cropped black hair framing a strong face with piercing blue eyes that seemed to cut straight to the truth. Even in casual clothes, a dark hoodie and jeans, she radiated authority. Her presence had always reassured Emily, but today it was a lifeline. Karen had been reviewing bank records, cross-referencing them with school records and online data. "Emily," Karen said, her voice steady, "there's something you need to know. David isn't just siphoning funds. He has a daughter, 14 years old. Her name is Zoe. She's living less than 20 minutes from here." Emily's chest tightened. Her heart skipped a beat. Her teacup trembled in her hands. 14 years. She had no idea. Zoe. The name felt foreign and heavy, like a weight pressing down on her chest. Emily imagined a girl with the same dark brown eyes that David had, the same sharp jawline that could turn from mischievous to brooding in a heartbeat. Her mind raced. How had David hidden this? How had she lived all these years unaware? Anger surged, hot and bitter, mingling with a deep, gnawing grief. This wasn't just betrayal. This was erasure. The daughter of her husband existed in the world, and Emily had never known. Karen leaned forward, placing a comforting hand over Emily's. "We need to be methodical, Emily. I've gathered addresses, school information, and guardianship records. You're going to meet her, but it has to be in a neutral, safe space. No surprises." Emily swallowed hard. She had imagined confronting David hundreds of times, but meeting Zoe, meeting the living embodiment of his deception, was different. It felt like staring into the heart of the storm. The next day, Emily drove to the address Karen had located. The neighborhood was quiet, suburban, with neatly trimmed lawns and children's bicycles leaning against mailboxes. Emily's mind buzzed with questions and fears. What would Zoe be like? Would she hate her? Would she already know about Emily, about Lucas, about the family that had existed only in secret for so long? Emily's eyes softened as she imagined a girl, alone, in her room, unaware of the life that might have been hers. The thought twisted her stomach. When the door opened, Emily saw Nicole Jenkins, Zoe's mother. Nicole was an ordinary woman in appearance, with shoulder-length chestnut hair streaked with premature gray, tired brown eyes, and a slight stoop in her shoulders that spoke of years of carrying burdens alone. She greeted Emily cautiously, politeness and wariness mingling in her tone. Behind her stood Zoe, clutching a worn copy of To Kill a Mockingbird against her chest like a shield. Zoe's dark brown hair fell in soft waves around her face, framing sharp, intelligent eyes that seemed to assess everything in their view. She was tall for her age, slim, with the careful posture of a girl who had learned to navigate a world she didn't fully understand. Emily's heart ached at the sight. This child was innocent, yet she represented a truth so painful it was almost unbearable. Emily knelt slightly, trying to make herself appear less imposing. "Hi, Zoe, I'm Emily," she said, her voice gentle, carefully measured. Zoe's lips pressed together, uncertain, and she glanced at her mother for guidance. Nicole nodded slightly, giving her silent permission. Zoe stepped forward cautiously, her movements deliberate, like she was testing the waters of a new and unfamiliar reality. Emily felt a surge of protectiveness, mingled with guilt and sorrow. Over the next hour, Emily and Nicole spoke quietly, while Zoe remained mostly silent, occasionally asking small questions about Lucas and school. Emily was careful to avoid overwhelming her with too much information at once. Yet, every word she spoke, every glance she shared with Zoe, was heavy with the weight of unspoken truths. Emily's mind oscillated between empathy and frustration. She wanted to shake David, to demand answers, but she had to focus on Zoe, the girl who had done nothing wrong. Later, back at home, Emily received the DNA results Karen had arranged. Her hands trembled as she opened the secure email. The document was precise, clinical, devoid of emotion, yet the results could not be more devastatingly clear. Zoe Jenkins, 14 years old, was undeniably David Thompson's daughter. Probability of paternity: 99.9999%. Emily dropped onto the couch, the folder of evidence slipping to the floor. Her chest felt tight, her mind a whirlwind of shock, anger, and disbelief. Her vision blurred with unshed tears. 14 years. 14 years of lies, omissions, and betrayals. And now, the evidence was irrefutable. She remembered the many nights David had returned late from work, the unexplained business trips, the odd phone calls he took in private. Every memory, once benign, now felt like a puzzle piece fitting into a horrifying picture. Emily's heart hardened. She could no longer see David as the man she had married. She saw only the deception, the careful construction of a double life. Yet beneath the anger, there was a strange, almost sorrowful empathy for Zoe. This child had been denied a father, a family, a connection she deserved, and Emily felt an urgent responsibility to help bridge that gap. Karen sat beside her, silent but alert. Emily's thoughts tumbled out in a torrent. "I don't know if I can forgive him, Karen. I don't know if I can face him without wanting to destroy him." Karen's hand squeezed hers reassuringly. "You don't have to forgive him yet. Right now, we focus on Zoe and Lucas, on building the truth. You'll have time to deal with David later." Emily nodded, swallowing a lump in her throat. She understood Karen's wisdom, but also felt the simmering anger deep inside, coiling and uncoiling like a live wire. That evening, Emily began writing a careful plan, thinking about how to introduce Zoe to Lucas, how to ensure she felt safe, and how to confront David without endangering anyone. Her fingers moved swiftly across her laptop, each word measured, each step meticulously plotted. Emily Thompson, once passive and trusting, had transformed overnight. The shock of discovery had ignited a fire within her. She would not allow this betrayal to define her family. As night fell, Emily stood at the window, looking out at the quiet street, the lamplight casting long shadows on the pavement. She thought of Zoe, alone in her room, unaware of her true parentage, and she felt a mixture of determination and tenderness. There was fear, certainly, but also a sense of clarity. The lies had been exposed, and now it was time to confront the aftermath, to nurture what was broken, and perhaps to build something new. Emily understood one thing with absolute certainty. The hidden daughter would not be a casualty of David's deceit. She would be part of the family, and Emily would see to it. The chapter closed with Emily feeling a rare sense of purpose, a tension between grief and resolve. The storm that had been quietly brewing in her life had broken, and in its aftermath, she had clarity. The path ahead was uncertain, fraught with emotional minefields, but Emily Thompson was ready to face it, with Karen's support. And now, with a mission to embrace Zoe as part of the family she had never known she had. A drizzly, gray morning settled over the streets of Midtown Atlanta, the wet pavement reflecting the faint glimmers of neon from storefront signs. Emily Thompson stood at the edge of her small townhouse balcony, the chill in the air biting at her bare hands. She hugged her cardigan closer, thinking about the endless maze of betrayal that David had left in his wake. Her green eyes were sharp, stormy, scanning the street below, as if she could catch a glimpse of the man who had shattered her life. The revelation of Zoe had rattled her to her core, but Emily's mind was already moving, calculating the next step. Betrayal could not stand unpunished. Karen Miller arrived promptly, her black raincoat buttoned neatly to her chin, hair damp from the drizzle. Her presence was grounding, a reminder that Emily was not alone in this. Karen's eyes, ice blue and unflinching, flicked toward Emily. "I've traced some recent transactions," she said, her tone steady and clipped. "David has been funneling money to someone named Claire Adams. She's involved in more than just casual contact. This is coordinated, professional. They're using the finances and his affair to cover their tracks." Emily's jaw tightened. She gritted her teeth against the rising tide of rage. Claire Adams. The name alone tasted like venom on her tongue. Claire Adams was, from the records, a woman in her early 30s, striking and confident, the sort of person whose presence demanded attention. Her tall, slender figure was complemented by perfectly styled blonde hair and piercing hazel eyes that could disarm and manipulate with a single glance. Her skin was flawless, pale but sun-kissed, hinting at both privilege and self-care. According to the financial documents Karen had uncovered, Claire was a lawyer at a mid-sized firm downtown, and she had embezzled company funds to provide David with gifts hidden in plain sight under the guise of generosity. The audacity of their partnership made Emily's blood boil. Not only was David cheating, he had created a perfect crime loop with Claire, intertwining infidelity with financial deception. Emily's mind spiraled with images: Claire's poised smile while writing secret checks, David accepting envelopes with cash and gifts, Lucas, her unsuspecting son, unknowingly about to marry this woman. The thought of Lucas, naive and trusting, being ensnared in this web, ignited a protective fury deep within her. She felt both maternal instinct and a sense of justice, a desire to strike before more damage was done. Karen handed Emily a tablet with surveillance images. Claire was pictured leaving a high-end jewelry store, carrying several large bags, her expression calm and self-assured. Another photo showed her handing a sleek envelope to David outside a quiet coffee shop. Emily's heart pounded, her fingers curling around the edge of the tablet as if she could crush the evidence itself. "They've been careful," Karen said. "This isn't a spontaneous affair. It's calculated, deliberate, and they've been covering their tracks for months." Emily nodded, her mind racing through strategies and possibilities, calculating every risk, every angle. As Emily studied the images, a flicker of memory surfaced. She remembered the nights David had claimed to be at work late, the sudden business lunches he had with colleagues she didn't know. Every lie, every omission, was now illuminated in full clarity. Emily felt a strange combination of vindication and grief. She had always trusted him, had believed in their life together, yet here he was, orchestrating deceit with meticulous precision. The emotional betrayal was compounded by the financial one, intertwining into a complex lattice of lies that threatened everything she held dear. Karen suggested an undercover approach. "We need more proof, Emily. We need to see them together, and we need financial evidence that's indisputable. That means observation, documentation, and patience." Emily's green eyes narrowed. She felt the familiar tension in her chest, the electric current of determination. She was not afraid. She was enraged, but also methodical. This was no longer personal. It was strategic. The next morning, Emily and Karen stationed themselves outside a downtown law office. The rain had stopped, leaving a wet sheen on the streets and a faint chill in the air. Claire Adams emerged, dressed impeccably in a tailored gray skirt suit, her blonde hair pulled back into a precise chignon. Her high heels clicked against the pavement with authority, her hazel eyes scanning her surroundings, calculating, always in control. Emily could feel the anger simmering beneath her calm exterior. This woman was a predator in pearls, elegant yet lethal, weaving a web that had ensnared David and endangered Lucas. David appeared moments later, his appearance disheveled from the morning rush. He had dark, slightly graying hair at the temples, sharp jawlines softened by weariness, and a habitual 5 o'clock shadow that now looked more like a mask for guilt than rugged charm. His brown eyes darted nervously as he approached Claire, and Emily could see the combination of desire and fear in his expression. He was part thrill, part coward, a man caught between indulgence and panic. From their vantage point, Emily and Karen watched as David handed Claire an envelope, which she accepted with a sly, knowing smile. Claire's confidence was palpable, almost suffocating, the sort that could dominate a room and everyone in it. Emily's fingers tightened around her notebook, where she was documenting the exchange. Her heartbeat thrummed loudly in her ears. Each moment of evidence piled higher, a dam ready to break. As they retreated to a safer distance, Emily's thoughts churned. She remembered the countless nights she had waited, hoping, trusting, never suspecting the depth of deceit. Now, the scales had fallen from her eyes. David had been living a double life, Claire his co-conspirator, and Lucas was the next unsuspecting victim. Emily's mind formulated a plan, a careful orchestration of confrontation, documentation, and exposure. She would not allow her family to be further victimized. That evening, Emily and Karen reviewed the collected evidence: bank transfers, receipts for extravagant gifts, photographs of covert meetings, and internal memos from Claire's firm, all meticulously cataloged. The breadth of the scheme was staggering, yet Emily's resolve solidified. This was a war of intellect, patience, and precision. They had to strike decisively, leaving no room for denial. Emily sat alone later that night, staring at the rain-streaked window. Her reflection, pale and tense, stared back at her. She thought of Lucas, of Zoe, of the innocent lives caught in the machinations of deceit. Rage mingled with determination, grief with cunning. Emily realized she had transformed in the past weeks, from a trusting, gentle wife into a strategist, a protector, a woman who would stop at nothing to defend her family. She finally allowed herself a long exhale. The path ahead was fraught with danger and moral complexity. Exposing David and Claire meant shattering lives, creating scandals, and facing retaliation. Yet the clarity of purpose was liberating. Emily felt a calm under the storm, a focus that allowed her to visualize the inevitable confrontation. She would protect Lucas, welcome Zoe, and hold David accountable. There was no turning back. The chapter closed with Emily feeling the weight of strategy settle like armor around her shoulders. The storm of betrayal had intensified, yet she was ready to face it. She would confront the lies, dismantle the scheme, and reclaim the narrative of her life. The arc of revenge, justice, and protection had begun, and Emily Thompson would see it through with unflinching resolve. The late afternoon sun cast a warm, golden glow over the manicured gardens of the Belmont estate, the air thick with the scent of freshly cut roses. Guests in formal attire sipped champagne, their laughter light, unaware that beneath the veneer of celebration, tension and treachery were coiling like a serpent ready to strike. Emily Thompson adjusted the sleeve of her tailored navy dress, her green eyes scanning the crowd from her seat in the front row. The adrenaline in her veins was electric, yet her posture remained calm, controlled. Today, she would expose the lies that had poisoned her family for years. Lucas Thompson, her son, stood nervously near the altar, a broad-shouldered young man with tousled brown hair and hazel eyes that mirrored Emily's intensity. He wore a sharp black tuxedo, his stance betraying a mixture of excitement and underlying apprehension. He had been briefed on the situation, yet the thought of humiliating Claire publicly left him conflicted. Karen Miller, ever steady, perched quietly near the edge of the crowd, her black coat blending with the shadows. Her piercing ice-blue eyes missed nothing. Every glance, every whisper, every suspicious movement was catalogued for the perfect moment to strike. The wedding party entered, Claire Adams leading with a radiant smile that seemed to hold the confidence of someone invincible. Her blonde hair was gleaming in the sunlight, her hazel eyes sparkling, her tall, slender frame encased in an elegant white gown. But Emily could see the cracks beneath the perfection, the slight twitch of her jaw, the restless tapping of her heel, subtle signs of anticipation and anxiety that she had missed before. David Thompson followed discreetly, trying to remain unobtrusive, his dark hair slightly mussed, jaw tight, 5 o'clock shadow catching the golden light. He exuded a mixture of pride and unease, a man acutely aware that his carefully constructed deception might soon unravel. The officiant began the ceremony, reciting the usual vows and declarations of love. Emily's pulse pounded, each word from the speaker sounding hollow against the storm of her thoughts. She thought of the months of clandestine meetings, embezzled money, falsified documents, and the betrayal that had spread its roots into the very heart of her family. The memory of Zoe, the hidden daughter, flashed in her mind, innocent, unknowing, and caught in the web of deceit. This moment was not just about punishing Claire and David. It was about reclaiming her family's integrity. As the officiant reached the critical moment, the ceremonial pause that traditionally asked if anyone objected, Emily's fingers brushed the flash drive hidden in her purse. The weight of it was reassuring, a tangible instrument of justice. Lucas, sensing his mother's resolve, placed a supportive hand on her back. Karen's gaze locked on Emily, a silent signal that everything was in place. Emily drew a deep breath, her chest rising and falling in a slow rhythm meant to calm the adrenaline surging through her veins. "I'm sorry to interrupt." Emily's voice rang out, clear and commanding, carrying across the hushed crowd. Heads turned, whispers spread, and an uneasy tension began to replace the light-hearted atmosphere. She rose, her posture tall, shoulders squared, green eyes ablaze with a controlled fury. "The officiant asked if anyone had reason this marriage should not proceed," she continued, holding the flash drive aloft. "I do have a reason, and everyone here deserves to know the truth." Claire's smile faltered, a faint line of panic tracing her perfect features. David's face went pale, his jaw tightening as he realized the moment of exposure had arrived. He tried to murmur something to Claire, but Emily's gaze cut through him like a blade. "Emily, what are you doing?" David hissed, stepping closer, but Karen's presence at his side made him hesitate. Ignoring him, Emily pressed the button on a small remote, and the large screen behind the altar flickered to life. The first image that appeared was a crisp photograph of David and Claire in an embrace outside a downtown coffee shop. The crowd gasped, murmurs rising like a tidal wave. Claire's lips parted in shock, her hand flying to cover her mouth. David froze, the envelope he had handed her weeks ago now appearing as damning evidence in full color. The slideshow continued. Photographs of envelopes exchanged, luxury gifts, false invoices, and bank statements filled the screen. Emily's voice rose steadily, recounting the details as if reading from a judicial transcript. She highlighted embezzlement, falsified documents, and secret financial transfers. Her words were precise, devoid of malice, yet weighted with the truth that could not be denied. The guests shifted uncomfortably in their seats, some pulling out their phones, others whispering furiously. The elegance of the garden, the soft string music, all contrasted sharply with the storm of revelation that Emily had unleashed. Karen kept her professional composure, recording the event discreetly, ensuring that each piece of evidence was properly documented. Lucas's jaw tightened as he watched Claire's expression crumble, realizing the woman he was about to marry was complicit in years of deception. His youthful idealism collided violently with the cold reality of betrayal. The final images appeared on the screen. David standing in the Belmont driveway, counting cash envelopes, and Claire with ledgers marked paid and gift. Emily paused, letting the weight of the evidence settle over the crowd. Silence fell, punctuated only by the occasional sob from a guest who understood the magnitude of the betrayal. "This is not a fabrication," Emily said, her voice unwavering, a mixture of righteous anger and undeniable authority. "These are facts. David Thompson has engaged in an ongoing affair while embezzling family funds. Claire Adams has conspired with him, betraying not only his wife and son, but everyone in this room." David finally found his voice, sputtering. "This is insane! You're ruining my son's wedding." "Am I, David?" Emily interrupted sharply. "Or are you ruining your own life? You have chosen deceit, and now the truth is being revealed. I am done allowing your lies to control my family's future." Claire's eyes darted around, desperate, but the proof was incontrovertible. Her composure dissolved entirely as the reality of public exposure sank in. The murmurs from the guests grew into audible conversations, some sympathetic to Emily, others shocked by the scandalous display. The officiant stepped back, uncertain how to proceed, while Emily felt a strange calm settle over her. She had expected anger, confrontation, perhaps even chaos. But this precise unveiling, the careful orchestration with Karen and Lucas, had achieved the clarity of truth without violence. Justice, subtle and public, had been served. Emily sat back down slowly, her pulse beginning to normalize, but her mind was already racing ahead. There would be fallout, legal battles, perhaps irreparable familial rifts, yet the first decisive blow had been struck. The deceit that had festered for months, perhaps years, was now visible to everyone. She had reclaimed control, not through revenge, but through truth and meticulous preparation. Lucas approached her, his eyes a mixture of relief and lingering disbelief. "Mom, you did it," he whispered, voice low but steady. Emily smiled faintly, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "We did it," she corrected, glancing at Karen, who nodded with quiet satisfaction. Together, They had dismantled a web of lies and in the process had shown that honesty, courage, and preparation could stand as formidable weapons against betrayal. The garden began to empty. The string quartet paused, and guests filed quietly toward their cars, some still whispering, some staring back at the screen, unable to process the spectacle they had just witnessed. Claire remained at the altar, tears streaking her pale cheeks, her perfect facade shattered. David stood frozen, torn between shame and disbelief. Emily allowed herself a moment to breathe, to feel the satisfaction of having taken back agency over a life that had been hijacked by lies. The confrontation had ended, and though the path ahead remained uncertain, she had won the first, and perhaps most important, battle. The first light of dawn filtered through the blinds of Emily Thompson's new townhome, painting the walls with soft gold and casting elongated shadows across the tidy living room. The morning air smelled faintly of coffee and freshly baked bread from the nearby bakery. It was a quiet, unassuming day, yet the echoes of the previous chaos still reverberated in Emily's mind. She perched on the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped tightly together, green eyes distant but focused. For the first time in months, the storm that had consumed her life had begun to clear, leaving a fragile but real sense of calm. The legal process had been merciless but necessary. Emily had walked into her lawyer's office, the flash drive of evidence secure in her purse, along with the signed divorce papers. She had already reviewed the settlement terms. The house would be hers, along with a substantial portion of David's remaining assets. It wasn't a victory in the way fairy tales promised, but it was justice. She could almost feel the weight of the years of deceit lifting from her shoulders. David Thompson, once a man of commanding presence, had been reduced to an almost unrecognizable shell of his former self. His sharp cheekbones and angular jawline were dulled by stress and humiliation. His dark hair streaked with gray. The arrogance that had defined him was replaced by a quiet, haunted demeanor. He had lost his job, his reputation, and any semblance of social standing. From what Emily had gathered, he now rented a modest apartment across town, avoiding the public eye. His downfall was complete, yet Emily allowed herself no satisfaction in his suffering. It was justice, not revenge, she had sought. Claire Adams' fate had been equally public, but far more punitive. The courthouse had sentenced her to 2 years in a low-security facility for embezzlement and wire fraud. Her blonde hair, once meticulously styled to project elegance and sophistication, now fell limp in unkempt strands around her face. Her eyes, previously sparkling with confidence, were dulled and shadowed with regret. The once imposing woman had been forced to confront the consequences of her greed and betrayal, returning every dollar she had stolen. Emily knew that the legal system had delivered a measured reckoning, but the emotional scars lingered for all involved. Emily's thoughts turned to Lucas, who had been both witness and participant in the exposure of Claire's duplicity. He had weathered the storm with surprising resilience, though Emily knew the ordeal had left invisible bruises on his psyche. His relationship with Claire was irreparably damaged, but he had emerged stronger, more discerning, and ready to build a life rooted in truth. Emily could see the reflection of her own strength in him. The courage to confront betrayal, the wisdom to navigate pain without losing oneself. 2 weeks after the court proceedings, Emily received a letter that caused her pulse to quicken. It was from Nicole Jenkins, the mother of Zoe, the hidden daughter she had discovered months earlier. Nicole was a modest woman with a gentle, tired beauty, her auburn hair streaked with premature gray, lines etched around her soft brown eyes from worry and life's hardships. She had raised Zoe largely on her own, navigating the treacherous terrain of David's secrecy and abandonment. The letter explained that Zoe, now 14, had learned about her father and wanted to meet Lucas and Emily to understand the family she had been kept from. Emily shared the letter with Lucas, who immediately expressed his desire to meet Zoe. "She's my sister," he said, determination hardening his voice. "She deserves to know her family, Mom." Emily nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. They arranged to meet at a neutral location, a small cafe halfway between their homes. The day of the meeting, Emily's nerves were taut, her fingers drumming on the tabletop as she waited. When Nicole and Zoe arrived, Emily felt an immediate recognition. Zoe had David's dark, intelligent eyes, the same intensity that had once ensnared Emily's heart, yet she carried them with innocence and vulnerability. Her brown hair fell in soft waves, framing a youthful face filled with uncertainty. She clutched a worn book to her chest, her small frame tense but hopeful. Nicole's posture was protective, ever aware of the emotional stakes for her daughter. The first encounter was awkward, filled with hesitant smiles and tentative conversation. Lucas, bless his patient heart, did most of the talking, asking Zoe about school, her favorite hobbies, and gently steering her away from the painful subject of David. Emily watched closely, her emotions a tangled web of empathy, anger, and cautious optimism. She realized that Zoe was an innocent casualty, undeserving of blame, yet deserving of connection. Over the following weeks, the trio built a fragile bridge of trust and familial bonds. They met for coffee, for lunch, and gradually, Zoe became a regular part of Emily and Lucas's lives. Meanwhile, Emily focused on her work, pouring energy into rebuilding her CPA firm, which had suffered during the public scandal. Some clients had left, wary of association with the notoriety, but slowly, business returned. The new townhome, smaller and more manageable than the family estate, became a sanctuary. It was quiet, safe, and unequivocally hers. Emily found solace in routine, in the simple pleasure of mornings without the suffocating weight of deception. David, ever in the shadows, occasionally reached out through legal intermediaries, attempting to reconcile or at least understand the consequences of his actions. Emily listened politely but remained firm. Forgiveness was not synonymous with trust, and she had learned the importance of boundaries. Claire's attempts to reach out through letters were met with similar restraint. Justice had been served. Further engagement would only reopen wounds that were just beginning to heal. The months that followed were marked by subtle, yet profound, changes. Lucas threw himself into his studies, pursuing his passion for landscape architecture, finding meaning in creating beauty and structure from chaos. Zoe grew comfortable in her new extended family, laughing at the small idiosyncrasies of Emily's home and developing a sibling bond with Lucas that was pure and untainted by past deceit. Emily, in turn, found a deep protective love for Zoe, a sense of responsibility tempered by compassion and understanding. One evening, nearly a year after the wedding disaster, Emily was preparing dinner when the doorbell rang. She opened it to find David standing there, diminished, weary, and visibly older. The arrogance of the man she once loved was replaced by a fragile, remorseful presence. His eyes, once sharp and calculating, now glimmered with genuine regret. "Emily," he began cautiously, voice low, "I've been in therapy. I'm trying to understand why I did all of this, and I want to apologize." Emily studied him silently, the emotions roiling beneath her calm exterior. Anger, disbelief, sadness, and a faint echo of old love intertwined in her chest. After a pause, she spoke, her voice steady. "I forgive you, David. Not for you, but for me. I cannot carry this anger any longer. But understand this. Trust, once broken, cannot be restored. David nodded, a sheen of tears in his eyes, and left quietly, leaving Emily standing in the doorway, feeling a strange mixture of closure and melancholy. That night, Emily reflected on the tumultuous year. She had been betrayed, humiliated, and forced to confront the darkest aspects of those closest to her. Yet through careful planning, courage, and unwavering determination, she had reclaimed her life. The house, the financial security, and the reconstructed family bond with Lucas and Zoe were symbols not of revenge, but of resilience. She had lost much, yet she had gained something far more enduring: truth, justice, and a sense of self that was no longer contingent on the deceit of others. The morning sun spilled over the small town of Millbrook, painting the streets in warm gold and shadows of early autumn leaves. Emily Thompson stepped onto the porch of her new townhouse, inhaling the crisp air, letting it fill the hollows left by years of betrayal and heartbreak. The garden, though modest, was carefully tended. Tulips, daffodils, and a small herb patch thriving under her care. Lucas, already awake, was crouched near the flower beds, helping Zoe plant bulbs for the first time. Zoe's hands were small, delicate, stained with soil, but her laughter echoed freely across the yard, unrestrained and genuine. Zoe had grown more comfortable since their initial cafe meeting. Her once timid posture had straightened, and the protective grip on her book had loosened. Her chocolate brown hair, often caught in wild waves, now fell neatly behind her shoulders as she leaned toward Lucas, discussing where to plant the tulips. Her dark eyes sparkled with curiosity, absorbing every detail, learning to navigate a family she had just discovered. Emily watched, her chest tight with emotion, hope, relief, and cautious joy mixing in an intoxicating swirl. She had waited years for a day like this, when family could feel whole again, even if imperfectly. Lucas looked older than his 17 years, tall for his age with dark, expressive eyes, lean muscle from weekend hikes, and a calm demeanor inherited from Emily. Yet, beneath his poised exterior, Emily sensed his lingering fear of betrayal, an inherited wariness from living through their father's deceit. Zoe, sensing Lucas's hesitations, brushed them away with playful teasing, comparing their gardening skills and competing on who could plant the most tulips in neat rows. Emily smiled, realizing how effortlessly these two connected, bridging the gap that decades of secrets had created. Midnight, Zoe's black cat weaved between their legs, tail high, meowing with curiosity. His green eyes flicked between the pair, judging their planting technique, while his claws occasionally caught on stray roots or petals. Emily chuckled, the sound feeling light, unburdened, a stark contrast to the tense atmosphere of their former home. The presence of a pet, a living, breathing creature dependent on them, seemed to anchor Zoe's sense of belonging. The front door opened again, and Aisha Thompson, Emily's sister, stepped onto the porch. Petite, with a wiry strength and keen alertness in her stance, Aisha had long brown hair tied back in a practical braid. Her skin bore the faint traces of sun from her years working as a community liaison and occasional volunteer police work. Today, she wore casual jeans and a green sweater, her presence both comforting and subtly commanding. "Morning," she said, voice calm, observing the small family tableau. Emily felt her sister's reassurance. Aisha had been a silent anchor through the upheaval of betrayal, a reminder that loyalty and truth could still exist. As they finished planting, Emily guided Zoe toward the patio, where a table was set for breakfast. Fresh pastries, fruit, and steaming mugs of cocoa awaited them. Zoe hesitated, glancing at Emily, searching for signs of judgment, but all she found was warmth. Emily met her gaze and smiled, gently, firmly, an unspoken promise of safety. The small gesture seemed monumental to Zoe. She allowed herself to relax, sinking into the chair, fingers brushing crumbs from her palms. Lucas poured syrup over pancakes with exaggerated care, joking about who would be crowned master pancake chef. Zoe laughed freely, the sound a balm to Emily's frayed nerves. After breakfast, Emily suggested a walk through the nearby park. The air was sharp and cool, the scent of fallen leaves thick and earthy. Zoe skipped alongside Lucas, their conversation animated, debating superhero movies, favorite authors, and the peculiarities of their shared sense of humor. Emily followed, hands clasped behind her, reflecting. The path ahead of them symbolized not just a literal stroll, but the journey of rebuilding fractured relationships, learning to trust, and creating new memories untangled from the shadows of the past. As they passed a small pond, Emily noticed a mother duck guiding her brood of ducklings across the water. She paused, and Lucas stopped beside her. "They're just like us," he said softly. "Finding our way together, learning to swim without sinking." Zoe leaned on his shoulder, a quiet acknowledgement of shared understanding, and Emily felt a lump rise in her throat. The metaphor resonated deeply. The chaos of the past was like a stormy river, but here, in this moment, their little family had found its footing. Returning home, Emily guided Zoe toward her new room, small but inviting. The walls were painted a soft lavender, with framed botanical prints she had chosen with care. A desk by the window, bookshelves neatly lined, and a comfortable armchair created a sanctuary for Zoe to claim as her own. Zoe's eyes widened slightly, mouth forming a small smile, a reflection of both surprise and approval. "It's perfect," she whispered. Emily's heart swelled. Validation, acceptance, and belonging had never been so tangible. That evening, dinner was a quiet affair, but conversation flowed naturally. Emily found herself sharing small anecdotes from Lucas's childhood, careful to highlight lessons of resilience and honesty rather than dwelling on past betrayal. Zoe contributed, speaking of her school projects and her ambitions to learn art professionally. Lucas chimed in with encouragement, highlighting her talents and ensuring she felt recognized and celebrated. Emily watched them interact, noting the subtle shifts in body language, the growing ease, the laughter that came without self-consciousness. As night fell and the stars blinked faintly over Millbrook, Emily sat alone on the porch, sipping a mug of chamomile tea. The tranquility was intoxicating. She reflected on the long, arduous journey, the lies, the heartbreak, the legal battles, and the painstaking work of rebuilding trust. Yet here, at the end of the day, with Lucas and Zoe inside, laughter spilling into the evening air, she realized that the family she had dreamed of was no longer a dream. It was real. Imperfect, yes, but genuine. The past could not be erased, but it no longer defined them. Midnight jumped onto the porch railing, tail curling around his paws, green eyes fixed on Emily. She smiled at him, acknowledging his silent companionship in the ongoing rebirth of their family. The sense of completion wasn't perfect or absolute. It was fragile, tentative, but it was enough. Emily knew that challenges would arise, that Zoe's adolescence, Lucas's teenage trials, and the remnants of past betrayals would require continued care and vigilance. Yet for the first time in years, she felt ready. Emily closed her eyes, breathing in the cool night air, feeling the comforting rhythm of life moving forward around her. She was no longer defined by the lies of her past, but by the love and connection she was actively cultivating. Her heart, once heavy with anger and betrayal, now carried hope and resilience. A family had been rebuilt, not through the perfection of circumstances, but through intention, courage, and the shared commitment to honesty and love. And as the moon rose above Millbrook, silver and quiet, Emily allowed herself a rare moment of peace. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, she could see clearly the road ahead, one of new beginnings, strengthened bonds, and the promise of a life rebuilt on truth, empathy, and enduring love. The first snow of the season fell softly over Millbrook, covering the town in a pristine white blanket, turning the streets into quiet paths of light and shadow. Emily Thompson watched from her kitchen window, steam rising from her mug of coffee, as Zoe and Lucas trudged through the snow in the backyard, their laughter ringing like bells in the cold morning air. The small townhouse, now their home, felt alive with warmth and possibility, a sanctuary from the years of betrayal and heartache that had once suffocated her. Emily, now in her early 40s, carried herself with quiet strength. Her shoulder-length chestnut hair framed a face that bore the faint lines of worry and determination, green eyes sharp and observant. She wore a soft wool sweater over jeans, practical yet comfortable, and her hands, strong and nimble, moved with the precision and confidence of someone who had rebuilt her life from the ashes of deceit. Each day, she poured herself into her accounting firm, regaining clients, earning their trust once more. The office had grown smaller but more focused, a reflection of the new life she was cultivating, simpler, honest, and grounded in integrity. Lucas, now 18, tall and lean with dark eyes mirroring his mother's intensity, had blossomed into a young man full of potential and warmth. His dark brown hair was often tousled from his outdoor projects, a light dusting of freckles across the bridge of his nose, giving him a boyish charm that belied his maturity. His choice to study landscape architecture had been deliberate. He wanted to create spaces that fostered calm and beauty, a contrast to the chaos of his teenage years. His new girlfriend, Madeline, was a kind, soft-spoken librarian with golden hair and gentle brown eyes, who shared Lucas's love of nature and art. Watching them together, Emily felt an almost maternal pride, tempered by relief that her son had found someone trustworthy after so many disappointments. Zoe, 14, had become a vibrant presence in the household. She was petite but strong, with long chocolate-brown hair often tied in a braid and skin lightly kissed by the sun from weekend walks in the park. Her dark, intelligent eyes sparkled with curiosity, and her smile, once guarded and uncertain, now came easily, lighting up every room she entered. She had quickly formed a close sibling bond with Lucas, their teasing, shared jokes, and arguments over trivial things, now a normal, healthy dynamic in their reconstructed family. Emily often watched them together, a mixture of relief and joy swelling in her chest. The daughter she had never known she had, now a tangible, living part of her family. Midday brought David Thompson to the doorstep. He looked older, thinner than Emily remembered, with graying temples and a face lined not just with age, but remorse. His once confident posture was slightly hunched, and his sharp features softened by the wear of consequences and reflection. He had worn a tailored navy coat, simple but neat, and carried himself cautiously, as though each step forward was tentative, testing the ground beneath him. Emily's heart skipped, a mixture of old wounds and curiosity surging through her. This was the man who had betrayed her, yet here he stood, vulnerable and sincere, hoping for absolution. I know this might be awkward," David began, voice low, strained with emotion. "I came to apologize. Not for the sake of my own peace, but because you and the kids deserve to hear it from me." Emily studied him carefully, her mind running through the memories of lies, deception, and heartbreak. Yet, she felt a surprising calm, a strength she had built over months of rebuilding her life. She nodded slowly, motioning for him to sit at the kitchen table. He sat, hands folded, and continued. "I've spent the past year in therapy, trying to understand why I did the things I did, why I let greed and desire cloud my judgment. I am truly sorry for the hurt I caused, for betraying your trust, for taking what was not mine, and for shattering our family." His eyes, dark and earnest, met hers. Emily felt the weight of his words, and the years of anger she had carried began to loosen, not for his benefit, but for her own peace. "I forgive you," Emily said quietly, surprising herself with the ease of it. "Not for you, but for me. I cannot carry this anger anymore. It's too heavy, and I have built a life worth living without it." David's eyes glistened with unshed tears. He nodded slowly, a relief washing over his weathered features. Though forgiveness had been granted, trust would never return, and Emily knew it. Later that afternoon, the family gathered for a snowball fight in the backyard. Lucas taught Zoe how to make perfect snowballs, while Midnight, her sleek black cat, prowled through the snow, leaping into small drifts with mischievous intent. Aisha Thompson appeared at the gate, bundled in a green parka and scarf, ready to join in the fun. Her presence was reassuring, a reminder that loyalty and family extended beyond biology. Together, they created memories that were wholly new, entirely untainted by the past, built on laughter, trust, and shared moments of joy. Evening fell, the sky turning a deep indigo, stars beginning to twinkle in the cold clarity. Inside, the house glowed with warmth from the fireplace, and the smell of a home-cooked dinner filled the rooms. Zoe sat across from Emily and Lucas, animatedly recounting stories from school, her hands waving in emphasis, cheeks flushed with excitement. Emily listened, content and calm, a deep sense of closure and growth settling into her bones. For the first time in years, she felt that life had returned to her on her terms, guided not by betrayal or deceit, but by honesty, care, and love. Later, Emily retreated to her bedroom, sitting by the window with a notebook in hand. She scribbled thoughts, ideas for her firm, and reflections on the year's events. She paused, looking out at the snowy landscape, considering how far she had come, from suspicion and betrayal to rebuilding her life, nurturing relationships, and establishing a new, honest normal. Her heart was lighter, her mind sharper, and her spirit stronger than she had ever imagined. Lucas joined her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "Mom, thank you," he said softly, "for everything, for believing in us, for giving Zoe and me a chance to be a real family." Emily felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, not from sadness, but from profound gratitude. "No," she replied, voice steady. "We all gave ourselves a chance. That's what matters." Night deepened, and the house settled into quiet contentment. Midnight curled up by the windowsill, Zoe tucked into bed, and Lucas reading beside the fireplace. Emily sat in her chair, a warm blanket over her lap, reflecting on the journey they had taken. Life was far from perfect. Challenges would arise, but the foundation was solid. Trust had been cautiously rebuilt, family bonds nurtured, and a sense of peace reclaimed. As Emily finally set down her notebook and closed her eyes, she realized that freedom, truth, and integrity had triumphed. Her life was hers again, rich in love and connection, unmarred by past deceit. And for the first time in decades, she allowed herself to believe that happiness, real, enduring happiness, was not just possible, but present, quietly flourishing in the everyday moments of a life rebuilt with courage and honesty.